Boston, 1855. The iron pressed too hard, scorching a brown mark across the collar of Reverend Clark's Sunday shirt. Eliza Morrison jerked it back, her heart hammering as she assessed the damage. Ruined. She'd have to tell him, offer to replace it from her wages, watch another week's savings disappear into the cost of a mistake made from exhaustion. She stood in the laundry room of the boarding house on the north slope of Beacon Hill, where steam rose in clouds and made breathing difficult. Outside, Boston moved through its Wednesday rhythms. Street vendors hawking fish, horses pulling carriages through narrow streets, church bells marking the hours with their insistent clamor. Free sounds, free commerce. Eliza had been free for 2 years, 7 months, and 11 days. She still counted. "That's coming out of your pay," came a voice from the doorway. Eliza looked up to see Margaret Douglas standing there, hands on hips, her expression harder than usual. Margaret ran the laundry service that employed 6 women, all of them formerly enslaved, all of them working 12-hour days for wages that barely covered their rent. Margaret herself had been free for 15 years, had purchased her own freedom through decades of saving every penny, only to discover that freedom in the North meant working just as hard for just enough money to survive. "I know," Eliza said quietly. "I'm sorry." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "How many hours have you slept this week?" "Enough." "That's not an answer." Margaret moved into the room, her footsteps heavy. She was perhaps 45, her face lined with exhaustion and determination in equal measure. She had escaped from South Carolina in 1840, had hidden in the hold of a ship for 3 weeks, nearly dying of thirst before reaching Boston. Her husband had been sold away before she left. Her 3 children, all born into slavery, had died before reaching age 5. "You're taking on too much work. The laundry, the evening sewing, the Sunday teaching. You're going to collapse." "I need the money," Eliza said simply. "We all need money, but you need sleep more." Margaret paused. "There's a woman upstairs, arrived 2 nights ago with Thomas, barely able to walk. Leg injury from the journey, infected, I think. She needs care." Eliza set down the iron. This was part of life on Beacon Hill's north slope. The steady stream of arrivals, all of them having traveled the network of safe houses and guides that stretched from the south to Canada. All of them carrying trauma that went deeper than any physical wound. "Does she need—" "She needs everything," Margaret interrupted. "Medicine, proper food, rest, someone to clean and dress that wound. But mostly she needs to understand that she made it, that this isn't a dream she'll wake from." "I'll help," Eliza offered. Margaret nodded. "Finish your work first. The Reverend needs his shirts by Sunday, scorched or not, and we can't afford to lose any more customers." This was another truth of freedom that Eliza had learned. It was fragile. Everything was fragile. The work she had, the room she rented, the small community of trust she'd built. All of it could disappear with one mistake, one accusation, one slave catcher who decided her papers looked false. She worked until her hands cramped, pressing shirts and sheets and tablecloths with mechanical precision. She had learned this work in Virginia, in the big house on the Whitmore estate where she'd been born. Master Whitmore had been a senator, had spoken eloquently about states' rights while owning 43 human beings. His wife had taught Eliza to do laundry properly because she liked her linens pressed just so. Had praised Eliza's careful work while selling Eliza's sister to pay for new furniture. Eliza had been 17 when they sold Clara. That was when she started planning her escape, though it took another year before she found the courage and the opportunity. When she finally climbed the stairs to the small attic room where Margaret housed new arrivals, she found a woman who looked closer to 50 than the 35 years she claimed. Her left leg was wrapped in bandages that needed changing. The smell of infection strong enough to make Eliza's stomach turn. Her face was gaunt, her breathing labored, her eyes tracking Eliza's movements with the wariness of someone who had learned that trust was dangerous. "My name is Eliza," she said softly, pulling a stool close to the narrow bed. "Margaret asked me to help with your leg." The woman didn't respond immediately. When she spoke, her voice was rough. "Name's Patience. Used to be Patience Henderson, but I dropped the Henderson part when I left. Don't want nothing of his? Where did you come from?" "Georgia. Cotton plantation. Walked most of the way to Virginia, then got help from the network the rest of the way." Patience paused. "Got caught in a trap 3 days from here. Steel jaws meant for animals. But they don't care what they catch. Thomas found me, got me out, carried me the rest of the way." Eliza carefully unwrapped the bandages, trying not to show her reaction to what she found. The wound was deep, infected, the flesh around it angry and swollen. This needed a doctor, but doctors cost money that Patience didn't have. They might not treat a black woman anyway, free papers or not. "This is bad," Eliza said honestly. "We need to clean it, get the infection out. It's going to hurt." "Everything hurts," Patience said flatly. "Do what you need to do." Eliza spent the next hour cleaning the wound with water boiled with salt, the way Margaret had taught her. Patience bore it silently, her jaw clenched, her hands gripping the blanket so hard her knuckles went pale. When it was done, when fresh bandages were wrapped and Patience had drunk some water and eaten a few bites of bread, she finally spoke again. "How long you been free?" 2 years, 7 months, 11 days. "You count?" "I count." Patience closed her eyes. "Does it get easier? The counting?" Eliza thought about lying, about offering comfort instead of truth. But Margaret had taught her that newly free people needed honesty, needed to know what they were facing. "No," she said, "but the meaning changes. At first, you count because you can't believe you're not going to wake up back there. Then you count because you're waiting for them to find you, to drag you back. Eventually you count because each day matters, because you're building something, even if you can't see it yet." Patience was quiet for a long moment. "I left my son behind," she said finally, her voice breaking. "He's 18 now, sold to a plantation in Alabama 5 years ago. I don't even know if he's alive. But if he is, he's wondering where his mama went, wondering if I abandoned him." The words hit Eliza like a physical blow. She had left people too. Her younger brother, only 10 when she escaped. Her aunt, who had raised her after her mother died. She told herself they would understand, that they would want her to be free. But she didn't know. She would never know. "You didn't abandon him," Eliza said firmly. "You survived. That's what mothers do. They survive so their children know it's possible. You don't know that's what he thinks. I know that's what you need to believe, because the alternative will destroy you." Patience slept, and Eliza sat watching her, thinking about all the people who had made this same journey, who had left everything and everyone behind for the slim chance of freedom, who carried guilt and grief and trauma that would never fully heal. Over the following days, Eliza tended to Patience's wound, watched it slowly begin to improve. Margaret brought food and checked on them regularly, her practical efficiency masking genuine care. Thomas, the guide who had brought Patience north, stopped by to check on her recovery. He was a free-born black man who made the dangerous journey south twice a year, guiding people to freedom at tremendous personal risk. "How many have you brought north?" Eliza asked him one evening. 43, Thomas said. "In 7 years. Lost 2 along the way, 1 to sickness, 1 caught by patrollers. His face darkened. Don't know what happened to her after. Don't want to know. Why do you do it? Thomas looked at her with something like surprise. Because I can. Because I was born free, and that's just luck, just chance. Could have been born enslaved just as easy. So I use what I have. Freedom of movement, light enough skin to pass sometimes, knowledge of the roots, to help others get what should have been theirs from the start. After 2 weeks, Patience could walk again, though she limped. Margaret arranged for her to work in the laundry, starting with light tasks that wouldn't strain her leg. The pay was minimal, but it was something, a beginning. But Eliza watched Patience struggle with things that free-born people took for granted. Simple decisions paralyzed her. What to wear, what to eat when given choices, how to spend her few free hours. Years of having every moment controlled had left her uncertain about her own preferences, afraid to assert any opinion that might be wrong. I don't know how to do this, Patience confessed one night while they worked side by side, pressing linens in the steamy laundry room. The running, the hiding, the journey north. That all made sense. I knew what I was doing. But this? Just existing as a free person? I don't know the rules. Eliza understood completely. She had felt the same disorientation, the same sense of drowning in choices. There are no rules, she said. That's what makes it hard. You have to figure out what you want, and then figure out how to get it. What if I don't know what I want? Then you start small. You decide one thing each day, what you want for breakfast, which dress to wear, where to walk on your afternoon off. You practice wanting until it feels natural. Patience was quiet for a moment. What do you want? The question caught Eliza off guard. What did she want? Beyond survival, beyond making rent, beyond the constant anxiety of being caught and returned south. What did she actually want for her life? I want to read, she said finally. Really read, not just recognize a few words. I want to read books and newspapers and understand everything. I want to write letters. I want to know things that were kept from me. She paused. And I want to help other people who come north. I want to be like Margaret, like Thomas. I want my freedom to mean something beyond just my own survival. That's a lot of wanting, Patience said quietly. Yes, Eliza agreed. It is. The hardest conversation came on a Sunday evening when Margaret gathered the women who worked in the laundry to discuss papers. All of them had documents claiming they were free-born or had been legally manumitted. But the quality varied wildly, and some wouldn't hold up under serious scrutiny. You need good papers, Margaret explained. Documents that will survive inspection by authorities or slave catchers. Without them, you're vulnerable every moment you're outside this house. But I have papers, Patience said, pulling out a folded document from her pocket. Thomas gave them to me. Margaret examined them and shook her head. These are basic. They'll work for casual questions, but not for legal challenges. You need better. Official seals, multiple signatures, documentation that matches birth records. These cost money. How much? Patience asked, though her face suggested she already knew the answer would be impossible. $15 for the full set. The room fell silent. $15 was weeks of wages, months if you had rent and food to pay for. It was an impossible sum for someone who had arrived with nothing. I can't, Patience said flatly. I'll never save that much. Then you borrow it, Margaret said, and you pay it back slowly, or you work it off through extra hours. But you get the papers, because without them, Everything else is temporary. Eliza made a decision. "I'll lend you half," she said. "$750. You find a way to get the rest, and you pay me back when you can." "Why?" Patience asked, echoing Ruth's question from years ago in Philadelphia. "You don't know me." "Someone helped me," Eliza said. "That's how this works. We help each other because we understand what it cost to get here." Over the following months, Eliza watched Patience slowly build a life. She moved into a tiny room in a boarding house 3 streets away, sharing space with another woman to cut costs. She learned to do fine laundering work, the kind that paid better. She started attending the small school that met in the basement of the African meeting house, where volunteers taught reading and writing. She made friends, found community, began to laugh occasionally. But she also struggled. The nightmares came regularly. Dreams of being caught, of being dragged back south, of watching her son suffer while she stood helpless. She woke screaming sometimes, disturbing her roommate and the other boarders. The constant vigilance exhausted her. Every white face on the street was a potential threat. Every knock on the door was potentially a slave catcher. "I thought freedom would feel different," Patience said one evening while they walked home from the African meeting house. "I thought I'd feel safe. But I'm just as afraid here as I was in Georgia. Maybe more, because now I know what I have to lose." Eliza had no comfort to offer because it was true. The Fugitive Slave Act meant that no formerly enslaved person was truly safe anywhere in the United States. Boston had a strong abolitionist community, but it also had slave catchers and people willing to turn in runaways for bounties. Safety was an illusion they all pretended to believe, because the alternative was paralysis. The fear became reality one afternoon in autumn when Eliza was delivering clean laundry to a client's home in the wealthier part of Beacon Hill. She was walking back, her basket empty, her mind occupied with calculating her wages, when she heard a voice that froze her blood. "Eliza? Eliza Whitmore?" She turned slowly and saw James Whitmore, the senator's youngest son, now perhaps 23 years old, and apparently in Boston on business. His face registered shock, then calculation, then something uglier. Eliza ran. She ran through streets she knew intimately, her basket abandoned, her heart hammering. She could hear him following, shouting for someone to stop her, claiming she was his family's property. Some people on the street looked away deliberately. Others moved to block his path. The abolitionist community in Boston had an unspoken agreement. You didn't help slave catchers. She made it to Margaret's boarding house and burst through the door, gasping. Margaret took one look at her face and immediately understood. "Who?" "Senator Whitmore's son. James. He saw me. He tried to follow." Margaret moved with practiced efficiency. "Upstairs. Get Patience and anyone else who's here. You're all leaving, now." "Leaving where?" "There's a safe house in Cambridge, a professor's home. He shelters people when situations like this arise. I'll send word. You'll be out of the city by nightfall." Eliza felt her world crumbling. 2 years of building a life, of establishing work and community and routines, all destroyed because someone from her past had recognized her face. "This isn't the end," Margaret said firmly, reading her thoughts. "It's a setback. You leave the city for a while, maybe a few weeks, maybe longer. Then we see. But you're still free, Eliza. He saw you, but he didn't catch you. That matters." By evening, Eliza and 3 other women, including Patience, were hidden in a wagon heading to Cambridge. Eliza watched Boston disappear behind them and felt the weight of loss settling over her. The laundry work, the Sunday teaching, the reading lessons she'd been taking, the small life she'd constructed, all of it gone in an instant. The professor's home was a large house near the college, run by a couple named William and Abigail Crawford. They were Quakers, stern and formal, but genuinely committed to the cause of abolition. They welcomed the women with quiet efficiency, showing them to a hidden room in the attic that had sheltered dozens of people over the years. "You're safe here," Abigail said in her formal manner of speech. "We have never lost a guest to slave catchers, and we do not intend to begin now." Eliza spent 3 weeks in Cambridge, working alongside patients and the others to earn their keep. Cooking, cleaning, helping with the household tasks. It was honest work, but it felt like regression, like losing ground she'd fought so hard to gain. "I hate this," she said to patients one evening as they peeled potatoes in the Crawford kitchen. "I hate that one person seeing my face can destroy everything. I hate that I'm not safe even after almost 3 years. I hate that I'll never really be safe as long as slavery exists." Patience was quiet, her hands working mechanically. "Margaret told me something before we left," she finally said. "She said freedom isn't a place you arrive at. It's a direction you move in. You keep moving toward it, even when you're pushed back. Because stopping, giving up, that's the same as returning to bondage." "That's not enough," Eliza said bitterly. "Moving toward freedom without ever reaching it. That's just different chains." "Maybe," Patience acknowledged. "But they're chains we chose, and we can choose again tomorrow to keep moving forward. That's what makes us free. Not that we're safe, but that we keep choosing despite the danger." After 3 weeks, Thomas brought word that it was safe to return to Boston. James Whitmore had left the city, apparently not willing to pursue the matter further once Eliza had disappeared. But Margaret advised caution. "Vary routes. Consider changing her name. Be more careful about which parts of the city she traveled through." Eliza returned to Boston, but found that her old life didn't fit quite right anymore. Some of her laundry clients had found other workers. Her reading lessons had continued without her. The sense of security she'd been building was gone, replaced by constant vigilance. But she also found unexpected sources of strength. The community rallied around her. Margaret offered her more work. Thomas introduced her to new contacts in the abolitionist movement. Patience, who Eliza had helped weeks earlier, now offered to share her room until Eliza could afford her own again. This was freedom too, Eliza realized. Not the absence of danger or struggle, but the presence of community. The ability to help and be helped. To build connections based on mutual support rather than ownership. To fail and start again without someone else profiting from her labor. Years passed. Eliza learned to read fluently, then to write. She began teaching others more formally, holding classes in the African Meeting House basement. Patience became involved in the abolitionist movement, speaking at gatherings about her experiences. Margaret continued running her laundry service and housing new arrivals. Thomas continued his dangerous work, guiding people north despite the increasing risks. The community grew and evolved, shaped by each person who arrived and each person who stayed. Eliza never stopped counting the days since her escape. But the meaning of the counting changed. It became less about fear and more about commemoration. Each day was a victory, a refusal to be defined by bondage, an assertion of her right to exist as a free person. She never learned what happened to her brother or her aunt. That not knowing remained painful, a wound that never fully healed, but that she learned to carry. She attended secret memorials for people who had died trying to escape, celebrated with people who successfully brought family members north, mourned the continuation of slavery while working tirelessly for its end. When the Civil War began in 1861, Eliza was 34 years old and had been free for 8 years. She watched young black men volunteer to fight, despite not being officially allowed to serve at first. She donated money to support the war effort, sewed uniforms, offered her small room as a meeting place for organizing relief efforts. And when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced in 1863, Eliza stood in a crowd at the African Meeting House and wept. Not because it solved everything, it didn't, left thousands still enslaved, changed nothing about Northern racism, but because it was movement, progress, a step toward the freedom that should have been everyone's birthright. Patience stood beside her and that crowd, both of them older now, both bearing the marks of hard-lived lives, both still standing, still free, still fighting. Was it worth it? Patience asked quietly. Everything we lost, everything we endured? Eliza thought about the question, about the cost and the gain, about the life she'd built from nothing and the people she'd left behind. Yes, she said. Yes, it was worth it. Not because freedom is easy or perfect, or because we're truly safe, but because we chose it. Because we kept choosing it every day despite everything. And that choice, that insistence on our own humanity, that's everything. They stood together in the celebrating crowd. Two women who had walked different paths from bondage to freedom, who had built lives despite every obstacle, who had learned that survival was resistance and that community was the foundation for lasting change. The weight of freedom, Eliza had learned, was real and substantial. It was responsibility and choice and constant danger and exhaustion. It was making impossible decisions, living with consequences, and building something from nothing while knowing it could be taken away at any moment. It was harder in many ways than the false certainty of bondage had been, because it required constant vigilance in a world that still saw her as property. But it was hers. The weight was hers to carry. The choices were hers to make. The life was hers to build. And that made all the difference.